One of the most contentious and colourful figures at the centre of the Hampstead hoax is an English woman who lives in Ireland named Angela Power Disney. You might think that you know everything about her, but chances are you only know the half of it. So today I'm going to tell you all about Angela, starting now. Now, Angela has been noted for being, I think the best word would be to say a dedicated promoter of the Hampstead hoax. Some might say relentless, some might say other less polite words. She's known for chain smoking while she does her videos. Because of that, she has a very husky voice. Some people have kind of unkindly, I think, said that she sounds quite masculine. I don't think that's the case, really. I just think she sounds like a person who smokes too much. Whatever. And she has a perpetually outstretched hand. She's constantly asking for donations, which she claims are to help in her work, quote unquote, as a whistleblower and journalist. Her name came up in two trials that have been related to the Hampstead hoax. One was the trial of Rupert Quaintance in the summer of 2017, and that she was named quite frequently there and was described in court as being not a nice person. She was also named in Sabine McNeil's trial in late 2018. And in that case, they actually showed videos of Sabine and Angela conspiring together to hunt down the children who were some of the victims of this hoax. And last August, her home was raided by her local police. In Ireland, it's known as, I believe it's called the Gardaí. I may be mispronouncing that, so please feel free to correct me. And that was following complaints from people in Hampstead that she had attacked. Her electronics were seized, and she was, quote unquote, invited to an interview with the police. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in this video. So that's just a general overview of Angela. I can say that she first got involved in the Hampstead hoax in early 2015, right around the time when Sabine first released the videos. So she was an early adopter. They were spreading across the internet like some kind of like fast-growing cancer or something. And so we talk about that in another video in this series called How the Hampstead Hoax Went Viral, and I'll put the link up there so that you can click on that if you like. So Angela kind of attached herself to the campaign. She didn't really seem to be friends with any of the major players like Belinda or Sabine or any of the others beforehand, but once things got going, whoo boy, was she in there. The first thing that we see from her vis-a-vis the Hampstead hoax was on her Facebook page. And I believe that would have been around the 5th or 6th of February, so quite early on. She did seem to have some friends. I'm thinking of Alan Allenson, who was recently tried on charges of, I believe he pleaded guilty to charges of malicious communications last month. You know, she wasn't in with the in crowd, if you know what I mean. However, she refers to herself as a citizen journalist, and it seems as though whenever a new buzzword comes along, she kind of adopts it. So at one point she was referring to herself as a child sexual abuse victim, but then that wasn't sexy enough, so then she changed that to a victim of MK Ultra, and then it was an Illuminati asset, I believe. So she kind of, whatever happens to be the big thing in vogue on the internet at any given time, that's what she is. I think this speaks to a strong need for attention on her part. That seems to be one of the major driving forces. And as we saw with Sabine, that can get a person in a lot of trouble. Seriously, it can be a big problem. One of the kind of funny side notes about Angela is that in the early days of the hoax, she spelled her name very, very oddly. She had been married to a person named Disney, and she wanted to keep her maiden name Power, so she called herself Power Disney, but she spelled Disney in the French way because she wanted to, I think, probably disassociate herself from the Walt Disney Studios because, Illuminati, evil, raped Fiona Barnett before she was born, that kind of thing. But anyhow, I found that kind of amusing at the time, and just a little tiny bit presumptuous. But anyway, she changed it back to regular Disney at some point. I think maybe because it just got too much trouble trying to spell her last name to people. Prior to Hampstead, what was she doing? She was a very strong evangelical Christian. She was, very, very strongly evangelical Protestant, like far, far, far evangelical. By the time Hoaxted came along, she had already been making videos on YouTube for quite some time. She was a bit of a pro at that, although she never really quite got the whole concept of, focus and lighting and all of that stuff. Not that I do particularly well, but, I'm trying. She did a bunch of videos. They all seemed to focus on basically bad-mouthing people. Her own mother, at one point, she did a series about narcissistic mothers and who'd have them, and Pot Kettle Black. And she did 3, I think it was, videos about the family of a member of the Gardaí who has become quite a buzzword in Ireland and whose name is synonymous with integrity. She did an entire video taking him down and saying that, his family was actually involved in criminal activities and that sort of thing. And if it wasn't criminal, it was probably illegal or immoral in some other way. None of that has ever been proven. One of the things that Angela doesn't seem to require a lot of is actual evidence. She believes that if 2 witnesses say a thing, that makes it true. Well, I can find 2 witnesses who will say a lot of really stupid shit. That doesn't make it true. I think she's kind of misinterpreting the Bible in that case. You can really see in those early videos how she's looking for attention. She's looking for people to click on her like button and give her, praise and that sort of thing. Now, in early February, when she became aware of Hampstead, seems to have been via Sabine's Change.org site that she put up, the one where she first released the videos, because that was really the kind of bombshell piece. And by mid-February, Angela had begun Facebook posting links to that site and to one of Sabine's blogs. The day before the Poffley judgment, Angela put up a video titled, "Ella and Abraham Say a Few Words in Exile About Tomorrow's Judgment." Now, judging from that, you would sort of think, maybe she got to interview them. Nope. It's not an interview by her at all. It seems to be a recording that she is replaying of basically Ella and Abraham talking between them about the case and what they think is going to happen and that sort of thing. But it's almost as though Angela kind of wants people to believe that she's a bit more closely associated than she really was. And sure enough, though, by the 14th of April, she's doing a video with Belinda Mackenzie in her back garden. And she's, trying to sound all journalistic, like saying, we're going to get your face in picture. Meanwhile, she's got her face, like, right up to the camera like this, while she's fiddling around with the camera. It's kind of amusing, but also kind of shows that by this time she's beginning to get the idea that maybe she's a journalist, which is sort of a thread that will run through all of this. She identifies herself in that video with Belinda as a member of a group that is promoting the hoax. And she's saying something like, maybe we gave up too soon. And I'm thinking that maybe we should do this or we should do that. In other words, she's placed herself squarely in the frame of the Hampstead hoax and thinks of herself as a key player at this point. And that would actually come to pass. She seems to have gone on kind of a rampage where she was, she traveled to the UK and she interviewed people, and she got an interview with Miles Johnston, the guy who does the Bases Project about alien abductees, only hers wasn't about alien abductees. It was about how she had been the victim of MK Ultra, having people chase her around in the woods at night, the whole, that whole story, which seems to be very common. Again, it's another common story that you hear from people who are essentially attention seekers. I think for her, I don't think this is incorrect, and maybe she'll correct me, but I think that for her, the Hampstead case was really the adventure of a lifetime. I think this was her big chance. She saw a huge chance where she could be perceived as a heroine, where she could be perceived as an important person, because she's always believed herself to be one. She just never had the chance to really show it. And she went for it with all guns blazing. It made her feel like she had a sense of purpose in life, I think, as well as giving her a focus for the vitriol that she tends to spew at one person or another at any given time. One of the things that you notice about Angela is that she does not maintain friendships for very long, as a rule. She may have some friends that she's had for years, I don't know, but what we have noticed in sort of following her activities for the past 4 years is that she tends to gain and lose friends at an alarming pace. First of all, they're the most wonderful people in the entire universe, and then they're shit because they're compromised, or they've done something that she dislikes, and so they must be, members of the MI5 or some other thing. Basically, she'll slag a person off as soon as looking at them. My personal feeling is that if I had the chance to become friends with Angela Power Disney, I would run. I would get the hell out of Dodge, because honestly, it's really that kind of friendship. You don't need it. And I think a lot of people in hindsight would probably say the same thing. In June, the first complaint from Angela came that she was on her way, I believe she was on her way to the UK, and some bastard stole all of her equipment and her camcorder and her phone and her money, all of her money, every last penny. And so this is kind of the first of many thefts that seem to happen to Angela. She is subject to so many thefts. I've never seen such a thing. Everything that she owns gets stolen from her and must be replaced. And so she goes on these begging binges. She has had a GoFundMe page in action probably for the past 3 years, I think. And I think when she first put it up, she kind of salted the plate by putting in, I believe it was 10,000 euros that she had inherited from her sister, in an effort to make it look as though that people were giving her money. It was really obvious that wasn't the case. But some people have given her money. Most have given her in-kind donations, like she got an office chair, I think, and some art and various other things like that. But the point is, she's always got the begging bowl out. She's always pleading poverty, and yet somehow seems able to zip off to Lanzarote when she feels the need for a bit of sunshine or to get away from her family or whatever. Kind of a dicey financial situation, it seems. The other thing that Angela is known for, besides the chain smoking and the begging, and the dissing of friends and turning them into non-friends, is that she has a tendency to record people on Skype conversations without their knowledge or consent, and then publish that because she says, "I'm a blurter." Well, there's such thing as being a blurter, and there's such thing as just being a shit, and that's being a shit. One of the things that she claims is that, as I said, she claims to be a journalist. I hate to say this, but if you tried that as a journalist, you would find yourself looking for a job very, very quickly. I think you'd be washing dishes, because that would not be tolerated. She, interestingly enough, though, she interviewed Abraham and Ella in June of 2015. So by this time, you can see she's getting quite close to the core of the group, and she's able to, to sort of command that kind of an interview, because Abe and Ella did not give interviews to just anyone. It seemed like they did, but really they were very controlling about, who they interviewed and how the interviews went and what questions were asked and all of that sort of thing. They had the idea that they needed to control the message they were putting out for obvious reasons. So the video of that actually did not get released until the following February, which is kind of amazing. However, when you listen to the video, you kind of find out why. And that is because she had been recording it without their consent or their knowledge. And when Abraham found out, he went completely ballistic. His teeny tiny little head exploded, and he just freaked out and refused to speak to her anymore. Now, funnily enough, within a couple of months, Angela had begun talking on Facebook about how she didn't really trust Abraham anymore. And perhaps he was involved in this thing in a different way than people had originally thought. And maybe he was setting Ella up. And maybe he was, he'd been sent in to handle Ella. Or maybe he was like a Trojan horse. And, that sort of thing. So it's clear that they had the fight in June. And for whatever reason, Angela was beginning to badmouth him by September. Didn't show why until the following February. So she can, if necessary, play her cards close to her chest. It's just most of the time she doesn't choose to. It became very clear that falling out with people was really par for the course with Angela. That's just how she is. It's just, relationships come and they go, and the thing that remains constant is that Angela is, two-faced about people. She suddenly finds something about them that she dislikes, and whoosh, they're out of there, So by early 2016, things had begun. In 2015, things really went kind of downhill for the Hampstead hoaxers. Charlotte Ward's blog was taken offline and put back online, and taken offline and put back online several times, and she eventually abandoned it in late October 2015. There was a group on Facebook called HRES, which was short for Hampstead Research, and people in that group had begun bickering amongst themselves. Some of that got publicized in around Christmas of 2015, but it had obviously been going on for some time. By early 2016, she was really ensconced as a high roller amongst the hoax promoters. She felt important, and worse, she felt like she was untouchable. By the law, because she lived in Ireland and the UK police could not do anything to stop her from doing what she did, she was untouchable by anyone in her little enclave of hoax supporters too, because she had a position of leadership. She felt that she was top of the heap there. About March of that year, 2016, we received an anonymous email at Hampstead Research, and it was from someone saying that they had had a conversation with Angela because they'd found out that she was running a charity that was benefiting a school for orphans in Kenya. And they wanted to talk to her about how they could donate, but she was really fuzzy about the details, and she couldn't 100% assure this person that their charity money was going to be properly spent and so forth. This person had suspicions that Angela might be skimming off the top of that charity. We asked questions on the blog about that, and she went ballistic. She went completely nuts. But she never would show us any evidence that we were wrong. And it was difficult because I didn't want to be accusing someone of something they hadn't done. But on the other hand, the evidence that this person was showing us seemed kind of convincing or at least suggestive, and it felt as though that was something that she really ought to be answering. Eventually, she did kind of flash some papers on screen and, show, show a few bits and pieces of her accounting books, and which seemed to have been drafted in crayon. The figures that she showed us didn't add up. So that is still a hanging question. I don't know if it's completely fair to refer to her as a charity scammer, because that has not been proven in court. However, she has never proven that she's not. And that would have been a good thing to know. I think it would have eased a lot of people's minds in some ways. Around the same time that this was going on, Angela began recruiting, or maybe she had always been recruiting and this was just the first we saw of it. But we noticed that she was recruiting different people to help her to promote the hoax. Some of these people seem to be vulnerable adults, like Jake Clark, for example, who was quite young, I think maybe in his late 20s at the time, and seemed to hang on everything that Angela said. And even though he had been involved already, I think he was already part of their core group, she was really encouraging him and saying that he was a hero and what he was doing was amazing, and that he should keep it up. And I mean, what he was doing was sharing videos and posts on Facebook that were endangering the lives of children in Hampstead, because he was saying that their parents were child sexual abusers and Satanists and should be stopped, and that the police wouldn't stop them. That's not what I call being a hero. That is called being a dumbass. And in the worst case, it's called being a criminal, because among other people that Angela has been involved with, Jake did go on to, first of all, be sectioned for, I believe it was in the range of about 8 months. And then recently, in the spring of this year, he was actually, he was convicted in the fall of 2018, but then he appealed and his conviction was upheld. So he did not have a beneficial outcome, and I don't hold Angela completely responsible for that. I do think she played a big role in convincing him that he was on the right track, because he is now a very, very mentally ill young man. I saw him at Sabine's trial. He was really looking terrible and quite out of control. And it was very, very sad. I think if I were his parents, I'd be very concerned, and I'd be furious with Angela and some of the others who encouraged him. But Angela does seem to have been the main one. Now, another person that Angela, I think, groomed, in a sense, was Rupert Quaintance. Now, we all know who Rupert Quaintance was, and most of us didn't really care for him all that much. Possibly a culture thing, because he's from the United States and he had that kind of gung-ho, I'm from the United States and we're better than you guys and we have guns and we're going to shoot you all, and your police don't even carry guns. If they approach me, I'll just box their ears, that kind of thing. Dumbassery. So he came over. First of all, he had a number of videos in which he and Angela talked, and again, she did record a couple of them without his consent and then put them up online. He was convinced to come to the UK and had his way paid by Angela and her friends. I believe Sabine actually contributed to that, as well as Belinda. He came to quote-unquote investigate, but one of the things that he said in his video, which was played at his trial, this should be a clue, he was going to go there to take names and kick down doors and take people's blood and basically sort this thing out once and for all in the good old-fashioned American way. Whatever. In reality, he kind of crept around and at one point went up to Hampstead and apparently he peed on the church. Tasteful. And he also took a picture of himself outside the gates of the school involved, and posted it on Facebook the morning that school started, And then in the comments underneath stated that he had a knife. Now, this went up at 9 o'clock in the morning on the first day of term. And as you can imagine, the parents, who had been alerted that he was in the vicinity and that he was gunning for them, basically, freaked out. As you or I might freak out if our small children were in a school where some nutcase was standing outside with a knife. That might be a problem for many of us. So the police were called, and at that time, the police believed that Rupert had left the country. As I describe in a post on the blog, which I'll put down below, we actually, at the blog, a number of our commenters, I didn't have anything to do with this, it just kind of happened spontaneously, but a number of our commenters looked at a video that Rupert had made of himself in the back garden of the house where he was staying, and were able to piece together from various visual clues exactly where he was, like down to the street number. It was kind of amazing and kind of wonderful, and he was arrested. And he was arrested. He was held in the UK for a year, and then he went on trial as I said, in August of 2017. He was found guilty of I believe two of the 5 charges of harassment, which is harassment, causing fear and fear of injury and so forth. He appealed his sentence and his verdict and lost, and wound up spending 4.5 months at Wandsworth Prison. Not a nice place, and I think it probably affected him quite deeply. He seemed quite disturbed when he got back to the States, from what I understand. And he really, that little episode has probably changed his life in some very, very negative ways. Now, to be fair, Rupert is an adult. He was nearly 40. I believe he was in his late 30s when all of this happened. Old enough to look after himself, you'd think, and to make reasonable decisions about what he wants to do with his life. So Angela encouraging him didn't help. But I don't think we can 100% blame her. I do think that it was clear from what she, the way she behaved and, the things that she said online, that she really, really wanted him to become a member of the core team that was going to be, putting out videos and spreading the word in the United States. I think that's what she's trying to do. She's trying to evangelize across the ocean now. I think because she realized at some point that the UK was kind of oversaturated, and people were either not believing it any longer, or those who did believe it had their own ideas of how things had gone. So she could own a whole new territory in the United States by incorporating Rupert into her sort of little fold of helpers, if you like. Anyway, yeah, he's now got a criminal record, and that'll follow him for the rest of his life. And he was really, I think, very ill-advised to come here and do what he did. I think that at this point he's paid a very, very strong price for that. And I think Angela should feel ashamed of herself. I also think she should feel ashamed of herself for sexually assaulting him, which apparently is what happened when he went to visit her in Lanzarote. Because one of the reasons that Angela was so dedicated to having him come to the UK was that she had a little tiny crush on him, just a little one. And she was convinced that he loved her back because she thought she was in love with him. And so apparently, according to Rupert, when in a conversation that he had with a person who later shared that conversation with me, he basically said that if he had been a woman and Angela had done this to him, it would have, made the newspapers. And that's actually true. People can be sexually assaulted no matter what gender, and that's just a thing. So some sympathy on that count, but honestly, I think much of what happened he kind of brought on himself. with Angela's help. She really was there to cheer him on all the way. Rupert was not Angela's only American recruit. Another one was Tom Dunn, who she actually talked with for the first time in May 2016. And he, at that time, had just finished making a video. I believe it was called Detestable, I think is what it was called. And it was all about satanic ritual abuse and, all that sort of thing. So I guess Angela thought she had a live one there, and she was right. They kind of, I guess, bonded over their evangelical beliefs, and Angela brought him on board in, I guess it was the summer of 2018 when he really started to take an active role and make videos about Hampstead, and he really got on it, except that he couldn't be arsed to listen to anyone who knew the details of the case. He just sort of went with what Angela told him. And so if you want to see a really funny episode of one of Angela's proteges being grilled by a person who knows what they're talking about, have a look at, there's a video by Hellbound Heathen. I will put that in the links below as well. It's not only kind of funny, but it's also very telling about the way people think about these things and the lack of evidence that they require. It's all about belief. All about belief. Okay, so in September 2016, we're back in 2016 again, Angela and Rupert were sort of at the center of a bit of a shitstorm on Facebook, and that's essentially her friends in the HRES group and others, I believe, were angry that she had brought Rupert over and that he was kind of, as they said, making a mockery of their investigations into the hoax. So hang on, I'll just pause briefly while you roll your eyes. Okay, done. Yeah, they took it seriously enough that they thought Rupert was going to threaten their look. So, to each his own, I suppose. So a number of people put up critical posts on Facebook about how Angela and Rupert were kind of messing things up and making everything look kind of silly, and as if it could look sillier, and endangering the credibility of their group. Again, eye roll. Okay. So Angela was not going to sit down and take this lightly, because she had at that point become, she, not quite head honcho, but she really felt that she had a leadership role at that point. And she decided to pour petrol on that particular tire fire with an announcement that she made in early September of 2016. And that was, she thought that Ella might be, excuse me, I have to say this in my Angela voice, complicit. And she started off with in a video talking about how her friends in the groups had betrayed her, but then she starts talking about how Ella had been involved in making child sex abuse videos with one of her children. Now that's a very serious allegation on a number of levels, which I'll get into here. First of all, she claimed to have been told about this by an impeccable source, because all of Angela's sources are impeccable until they become compromised. This person was alleged to have MI6 connections and Army connections and all sorts of other things. I don't know, that somehow made them more credible. I don't know. Now, at this point, she began saying that Ella was not the innocent mother, but that Abe, who last year, in 2015, she had been saying was a Trojan horse and probably, sent in to handle Ella, now Abe was the hero of the piece. And he was somehow being suckered into this position of helping Ella, even though Ella was already, doing criminal things and abusing children and that sort of thing. And so she didn't name the person who told her about the videos, but nor did she do the normal thing that a person would do when they suspect that there might be videos of child sexual abuse, and that is get on the horn to the cops. Stat. Like, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Call the police. That is not something to mess around with. But did Angela do that? No. Of course she didn't. Don't be ridiculous. So she decided that she was going to throw Ella under the bus. Now, this seems like a strange decision, and we weren't really sure what was behind it at the time. It took a while for it all to settle out and become a bit more clear. It seems likely that it had to do with that dynamic I was talking about in the group, where the Ella, Team Ella was kind of, playing against Team Abraham, and the Team Ella was opposed to Angela trying to take over as their leader, because Team Ella consisted of people who thought they were leaders. Christy Sue Costa, Sonia Van Gelder, various people like that. So the scandal, I guess, that we refer to as Ellagate, I think was probably Angela's way of sticking it to Team Ella. She was basically saying, okay, fine, you might not like Rupert, but I've got this amazing piece of information that no one else here has. Now, the fact that she either made it up or was unbelievably credulous and believed her impeccable source, that has nothing to do with it. The fact is, she thought that she had a bigger, better story, and she was now back in control and back in the driver's seat, which is where she wanted to be. So it was interesting because she released a video 2 years later saying that it's possible that her impeccable source maybe wasn't quite so impeccable after all. Really, you think? And she retold the story, only this time she gave different details, and this time she was saying the video, if such exists. So it's gone from being like the hottest property in Hampstead land to a non-entity. Now, there's probably a reason that she downplayed that as well. On the 17th or 18th of August, the police came to Angela's house, and they took away all of her computers, and for some reason they towed a car. I don't really understand what that was about, but anyway, they did. And they took them away because people had come over and made charges against Angela, people from Hampstead. The police came to her house, took her stuff, invited her to an interview, and she was quaking in her boots. I don't think I have ever seen her quite that serious and distressed. I think it suddenly hit home to her that day that what she was doing was serious and not just playing around for the sake of, for the sake of attention and money and fame. And so after that, after the police came to her, we began to find that she was kind of discarding certain things that she had stated, like the thing about Ella. And I think that's because she knew the police were going to look in her computer, and there was no such evidence whatsoever. She didn't want to have to defend that in court, so she could say, "Oh well, I was deceived," as one does. So Angela was quite shaken by the police raid, as anyone would be, I'm sure. It's not a nice thing to have the police come to your house and insist on searching. It's must be an incredible violation of privacy, as well as just fear that they're going to find something that will incriminate you, and especially when you know that there is a lot of stuff that will incriminate you. And Angela was convinced at first that she was immediately going to be going to prison. Then she decided, oh no, she's going to tell the police that they need to look on her computer and find evidence that people at Hampstead Research had harassed her. Now, they will probably be able to find evidence that we've written a lot of articles about her, because she set herself up as the head honcho of Hampstead. That's how she rolled. But the idea that they're going to search for evidence against someone when they have her equipment is kind of silly. If they wanted to search anything, they would have, seized my computers and searched those. No one's ever done that. Why haven't they done that? Because I haven't done anything illegal. That's the way it works. So, backing up a little bit, Just back up the truck here. The raid happened in August 2018. In around, I think it was March of 2018, Angela was getting bored with this whole thing. And I think she had decided that her true path lay in evangelical Christianity and claiming to be an MK Ultra Illuminati asset, or reluctant asset, as she called herself. So in March, she announced that she was retiring and that she felt that she couldn't do very much more about the Hampstead case. So, off she was going to go into the wild blue yonder. A couple of weeks later, someone posted on the David Icke forum, Post Without an End, that they had found a video in which one of the protected witnesses from Sabine's trial, who cannot be named, had been seen on a video with two of their children, and that, somehow this, I don't know, it proved that they were all alive and well, I suppose, and they were successfully, running a business. So that inflamed things once again, and as soon as Angela got wind of it, she insisted that she absolutely had to return to being, the queen of the Hampstead hoax again. So, why would she feel the need to do this? That's a really strange decision to make because, for one thing, she'd already been speculating that the people in question, that the children had been killed. So much for that theory. But also, why does it matter whether they're in a video promoting their own business? That makes no difference to anything. And nor is it related in any way to the Hampstead hoax. They were off minding their own business, doing what people do when they're in business, and that is, participating in making a video about how well their business had done. Doesn't seem like a very bad thing to do to me. However, that to Angela was just like a red flag to a bull. And the next thing you know, she's back on the job. She's putting up more and more and more, just furiously angry, venomous, absolutely venomous posts about the people involved, who were the alleged abusers, the people who were accused in the hoax, and essentially making everyone's life a living hell again. Oh, yay. So when she was arrested, frankly, I wasn't terribly surprised that she was arrested, because after those videos, the video went online of the protected witnesses, her activity level just skyrocketed, and the level of venom in her posts absolutely went, it trebled or quadrupled. And so the arrest seemed to have a kind of an interesting effect on her. On the one hand, I keep calling it an arrest. It wasn't really an arrest. It was a raid. I'm sorry, I shouldn't call it an arrest. It exhilarated her, and yet it also terrified her. And I think that triggered probably a bunch of drinking, because she has been known to have trouble with alcohol abuse in the past. She's said that herself. I'm not speaking out of turn there. So the Gardaí inform her that her case is being sent to the DPP, which is the same as the CPS here. And she freaked out. And at that point began, ranting and raving, and then decided to check herself into rehab for her alcoholism. For some reason, she chose a Catholic rehab center. I believe it's, I'm not sure why she would have chosen that. Someone did tell me that they thought perhaps it was because when the case goes to trial, she'll be able to take a nun or a priest with her to say, she's done her best in rehab, and what she was doing was because of the drink, and it wasn't really her, and, please give her a lighter sentence. That's one possibility. And I won't discount that. That is certainly not unlike something Angela would do. So the question is Angela sincere about drying out and getting her life back on track and maybe facing the whatever charges might come down the road, facing them with a certain amount of dignity? Or is this about getting a religious person to come and sit with her in court and and attest to her quote unquote good character and say that she doesn't deserve a long sentence? That is entirely possible. It's not a certainty. We don't know that for sure, but it's something that has been done in the past by others, and it's something that you can't really discount. So if she goes to trial and a nun or a priest shows up, we'll know what's happening. So there is more to tell about Angela and her escapades, but honestly, it's basically a cavalcade of nastiness. You can find a great deal more about her on the Hampstead Research blog. If you go to the search bar and just type in Angela Power Disney, or go to the tag cloud and just click on her name, you'll find a lot of stuff about her. We've written about her extensively over the past few years. I feel in some ways as though we've gotten to know her quite well. She would probably not be too happy to hear me say that. I don't mean it in a bad way. I just mean it in the sense of being able to predict and understand her behavior a little bit better. I believe she is driven by her own ego and her own need to appear and feel important, and whenever anything happens that comes along to kind of puncture that, you can see her panicking and freaking out. So, that's not a diagnosis, it's just an observation. It's just something that I've seen about her. So we'll leave that for now. We will probably be coming back to a couple of the topics that we've discussed here, including Tom Dunn and including Rupert Quaintance, both of whom are much longer stories than I could really fit into a short video about Angela. And yeah, if you need more information, either just ask in the comments below, because I'm always happy to try and answer, or have a look at the blog. And I'll leave it there for now. Take care. Bye now.